What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Bench. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson, who has chosen not to show his face and instead project his number 4 Raiders jersey directly to the camera.
What do you mean number 4 Raiders jersey?
Yeah, it's Derek Carr. Don't let this man fool you. It's not our new Lord and Savior, Aiden O'Connell.
Very
at least
convenient,
Raiders fans.
Though. Very convenient.
It is very convenient. I wish it was more like easily accessible to be able to change like the names on the back of jerseys, like just to go into a place and be like, "Hey, swap a name on here. Let's get this done," and you could repurpose stuff.
But no, because then you wouldn't spend upwards of $100 on another one. So why in the world would they ever do that?
Well, it's like I bought a Cam Newton jersey the one year that he was the Patriots quarterback and whatever. I mean, I got that year's use out of it, but it's like it's the Patriots jersey and it's number 1. Like we're gonna have number 1s forever, but I can't easily replace the name, so I'm never gonna fucking use it again. But whatever. Hey, at least I have a novelty.
Like I've got so many old jerseys from all these sports. My favorite, I've got a Kevin Boss jersey. Speaking of random tight ends.
Holy shit.
That's got to be my most vintage jersey for sure. At least my coolest one.
I'd have to look. I don't know what my most like random jersey is. I know I have a Jabba Chamberlain Yankees jersey somewhere.
I have a Tyson Ross Padres jersey.
What is wrong with you?
My dad went to Petco years ago, and he said like they like only had Tyson Ross jerseys. I don't know if it was National Tyson Ross Night in San Diego, but I have it. I still have it. I wear it occasionally.
I will say it just took about 4 seconds in my head for it to click when you said Petco. I was like, why are they selling Tyson Ross jerseys at a Petco? That's very weird. But Petco Park, understood. Okay. Pat, how was your Christmas? I mean, we're only a day removed here from the holiday. What did you do?
It was good. I mean, well, you know, Christmas. What's not to like? I particularly enjoyed it more from the outcome of one specific football game that we will touch on briefly, or maybe not so briefly in my case. But yeah, how was it out there in did you have a white Christmas? Did it snow out in Denver?
No, not the day of. It snowed today though. So we've got snow on the ground. Yeah, we got snow on the ground right now. It did not snow the day of. It was just
I don't
cold,
give a shit about white Christmas. I fucking hate the snow.
I like it visually, but it is definitely
it's nice for the 10 minutes while it's coming down, and then just the sludge and ice and risking your life every time you go outside part is the part that I don't quite vibe with.
Yeah, no, it's not the best. It can be dangerous. But yeah, we had a pretty low-key Christmas, just kind of sat around. We opened our gifts. I got a coffee machine, so we made some coffee and just watched sports all day. I mean, we had football on all day, which was a nice little change, I guess. And the Nuggets played as well at noon, so they took down the Warriors because we are the superior team in the West, but had a good time. But Pat, I think the biggest Christmas headline, obviously, is Ravens 49ers. And I mean, we'll talk a little more about that, after we get through some fantasy stuff, but that game was something. It delivered in its own right, and I mean, I don't even know what to think of the playoff picture right now. It was a hell of a game.
Shocking. It may not have been the best day of football yesterday, but it was intriguing to say the least. Like all 3 games were at least interesting, or the Giants made the second one interesting.
Yeah, so we'll run through the playoff picture here after we get through some fantasy stuff and also some interesting weeks for our own personal favorite teams. Pat obviously being the Raiders, and me, even though I'm wearing a Texans jersey right now, the Patriots, who just, of course, had to go and win a game and botch our draft position. I was there at least. I got to see the game. It was cold as fuck, but, of course, we had to kind of mess that one up. But hey, whatever. Oh, Pat, this is one thing I meant to touch on. How are your leagues going that you're still alive in? I know you mentioned last week you got some title game. Oh, thumbs down.
0-2 in semifinals. One I was a little more upset about because I dropped like 135 and lost. Into the Ravens game, I had Lamar, Kittle, and Ayuk. So yeah, great, awesome. They had McCaffrey. So then any chance of they had Mike Evans, negation. They had Zeke, it wasn't for me. And in the other one where I wasn't as good, my buddy's fiance, she whooped me, and I am afraid I'm going to have to go into witness protection at this point. I'm shocked I haven't heard from her yet. Tim, when you listen to this, please tell her not to bother me. I'm scared.
Oh God, brutal. Yeah, the two leagues I am still alive in, both on NFL Network, NFL Fantasy, whatever.
Ew.
Yeah, I know. I hate it. I hate it a lot, but neither of them are. Well, one of them's my league, and somebody just asked me to run it on there. I said, "Fuck it, I already got another league on there, so what's the difference?" But one of them is the one where I'm just fighting for the number one draft pick next year. I did win in that league thanks to Brees Hall dropping fucking 43. So I won in that league. I'm moving on. I think I've already secured like a top 2 pick for next year, but we'll see where that goes. And then in the league that I run with some of my viewers, I am in the championship, so we will see if I can, kind of redeem myself a little bit and win some kind of fantasy championship this year. That's a league too where my team's kind of built around. Think about this. I have a Mahomes and Kelsey stack and Austin Eckler on this team. How did I make it this far? Like those are big names that have just been pretty bad most of the year.
We'll talk about busts of the year next week, but I feel like those are 3 of like the nominees are like I feel like they'll certainly be in that montage. So yeah, that is who's carried you.
So I mean, look, I went 10-5 in the regular season. I've got Mostert, Debo, Puka. So they've done, I guess, a lot of the heavy lifting. David Montgomery, Nico Collins, and then the guys who have done a lot lately. Brees Hall has obviously picked it up, and then I've had Brandon Aubrey all year, which has been also a big help. So yeah, it's got just enough. I decided to start Kyler this week to hopefully secure things. Kyler over Mahomes. They face the Eagles. Mahomes faces the Bengals, and I'm just kind of done with Mahomes shit. To be honest with you, probably a couple weeks too late.
Oh what? No. Oh, you're playing our boy FPS Gandhi too. Talk your shit in the chat there.
Oh, is that who it is? Gandhi, I'm coming for you. Bro. All right. I gotta redeem myself. Like I said, I need to win at least one fantasy league this year. But that's enough about our leagues.
The podcast.
Yeah. Oh God, no. That's enough about our
league. No. I don't know how to do this either. So no.
Fair enough. For all you other viewers out there and listeners, if you are in your championship, congratulations. Just a little programming note. This will be our sort of last, fantasy advice focused show. We're not going to dive as much into, next week, like matchups and stuff like that, because honestly, if you're still playing fantasy into week 18, you shouldn't be. And it's just not a week I have any interest in entertaining as a week that should be fantasy relevant, because it's not. Your league, whoever the commissioner is, or if you're the commissioner, you should make sure that your league is over before week 18, just due to the players that can get benched and all the goofy storylines that end up happening.
Committee kind of shit.
Yeah, and it's like this year, I haven't looked into the scenarios, but I'm sure there's a possibility that some Ravens get benched or some 49ers get benched, depending what happens here over the next couple of weeks, even though the 49ers just, took that L, making things a little dicier for them trying to secure the 1 seed. But nonetheless, all those things still on the table. Should not be a week that you play in fantasy. Now, look, we may be nice and toss you a few little nugs here and there about guys we think might be a good play, but that is not going to be the majority of our show next week. The majority of our show next week will be a bit of a fantasy wrap-up sort of show. Talking about some MVPs, the biggest busts. We'll probably make it our fantasy award show. And you guys can take that in for what it is before we hit our whatever stride we're going to hit in the off season. We'll see what that ends up being. But yeah, nobody should be playing fantasy in week 18. And that is what we have to say about that. But for this week, we will be addressing fantasy stuff, obviously, and heading into next week. But Pat, the biggest takeaway, I think, from this past week in fantasy, I mean, I did not think Amari Cooper would be the headliner of this show that we'd be talking about, and definitively so. I mean, what a fucking freak that guy was, huh?
Absurd. I mean, first play of the game, I think he brought in like a 50-plus yard catch, and he didn't slow down. 265 yards, like 265 yards alone would have been a huge game changer for fantasy purposes. But the fact that he throws in 2 touchdowns and 11 catches. Like 51 fantasy points.
Yeah.
That's gotta. I'm talking out of my ass, but like I don't remember many wide receiver performances.
I believe it may have just been Jamar Chase this year that did that. I think Jamar had like 53 or something like that, and there was
like
one
4
more
touchdowns. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jamar went up. Oh, and the DJ Moore Thursday night game, I think, was probably close to this. But otherwise, yes, this was a top 3 at the very least.
Did they have Joe Flacco throwing them the football?
They, upon review, did not have Joe Flacco throwing them the football.
So I'm a bit more impressed by this.
Yeah, this was wild. This was, I mean, I guess not completely out of nowhere because obviously we've seen this passing game show a lot more signs of life with Joe Flacco under center, but it's just another kind of exclamation to the Joe Flacco story that has emerged here. I mean, this guy is playing out of his mind lately, and he's about to take the Browns into the playoffs. Pat, he's got the Browns with a chance to get the #1 seed. It's low. It's a very low chance. Yeah. It's probably not going to happen, but there is a scenario still in play where that could happen. At the very least, they're going to have a relatively high, well, I guess not, they're going to be a wild card because the Ravens are probably going to win the division, but still, they're putting themselves in a great position as we head into the playoffs.
I will say, I think Coach of the Year is a bit of a wrap, and I think it belongs to Kevin Stefanski. You know, they've had four different starting quarterbacks. They've won games with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, with Joe Flacco. I don't know if they won any of the P.J. Walker games because he's just actually terrible, but what they have gone through in terms of quarterbacks alone, that defense has been huge, and I know he's an offensive coach, but to keep the unit together the way that he has is remarkable. And we've seen some of the other like slam dunk candidates. We've seen their teams start to fade a little. Dan Campbell shout out is really the other guy I'd put in that, but I think Stefanski's done more with less than Dan Campbell.
I would agree. At this point, I thought Dan Campbell was a shoo-in, and honestly, it may be. It's obviously not voter fatigue because he hasn't won the award, but it's almost like Dan Campbell's been a front runner for so long that it's like somebody else popping up. You're almost like, ooh, shiny. But no, Stefanski does actually deserve it. The other person I would say is still in contention for it, depending what happens these next 2 weeks, would be Shane Steichen with Indianapolis, because how the fuck is this Gardner Minshew-led squad potentially going to make the playoffs? They are still, as of right now, in line to make the playoffs as the 7th seed by virtue of several tiebreakers because there's a lot
of teams
that are 8 and 7.
They're about to run into a brick wall next week, though, is what we're forgetting.
Who do the Colts play next week? Oh, the Raiders. They've got the Raiders and the Texans the next 2 weeks. So, I mean, look, the Raiders, Pat, the fantasy MVP, the true league winner of fantasy leagues this year, if people started them, has been the Raiders defense and special teams without question. Jack Jones out there, the Grinch that stole Christmas and stole everyone's fantasy titles away if they were facing the Raiders defense. Yeah, they've been monstrous, but yeah, Shane Steichen would be the only other one as far as like doing a lot with not much in terms of Coach of the Year candidates. But yes,
shout out to Miko Ryans
has been
as well.
Great. Yep. Definitely shout out.
And like obviously they've still been ass, but shout out Jonathan Gannon. Like that team could have been a lot worse. And even the games they lose, they've played a lot closer games than we thought. They've played with a lot more fight. Obviously he they still were very bad, but better than we thought.
Yeah, Gannon's a guy that you have no reservations about, heading into year 2 with him. Just kind of curious to see what he can do with a full season under his belt and a full offseason to maybe build a little bit more of what he wants to build there in Arizona. But yes, Amari Cooper, 51.5 fantasy points, breaks the Browns' single-game receiving record held by none other than Josh Gordon. I am a little sad to see a Josh Gordon record go down, but hey, it is what it is. Massive performance from Amari Cooper. And Pat, it feels like Amari Cooper has not been a player all year that's been super consistent. It feels like Amari Cooper is kind of the savior of what would probably be a lot of like auto-drafted teams. Like it's very funny. Like he's a guy who carried a lot of teams. If you made the playoffs with Amari Cooper and you won, you probably weren't like a super active owner. That's just kind of the vibe that I get. You were lucky and now you just got super lucky. So
Amari Cooper is one of those guys where like he's good. I don't think anyone's going to argue that, but he's never a guy that you're like super excited to draft. Mm-hmm. Like he's in like a clear like I don't know, the third tier of wide receivers, it seems. And everyone's just kind of like, oh, yeah, Amari Cooper. But you always go with the younger guy, the guy with more upside. But, yeah, if you kind of played it safe or auto-drafted, you are going to be absolutely thrilled with Amari Cooper. Like, who would have thought? He had a good week last week, too, albeit, nowhere close. But he had 104 for 109 and a touchdown. Solid, but pennies on the dollar compared to this week. So, in the way Joe Flacco's humming, and same thing with David Njoku. David Njoku had another solid game with a touchdown. You are absolutely riding the Cleveland Browns. Even Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford has been solid. You are starting as many Cleveland Browns as you can this week, which even a few weeks ago I do not think anyone think that we would say that.
Get Cedric Tillman in your lineups, people. You heard it here first. But no, Amari Cooper, the face of this week in fantasy football. But he was not alone. If you were to put together a Mount Rushmore of the fantasy performances this week, George Pickens is absolutely number 2. The problem with George Pickens is he probably wasn't in a lot of people's lineups. Cooper is at least a player who's been good enough, and especially building off of last week's performance, that a lot of people probably did start. Pickens is a guy that was resigned to a lot of people's benches this week, and I'm sorry if you had to see his 35.5 points go to waste on your bench. 4 catches for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns with Mason Rudolph at the helm, no less.
But the thing is, you can't be too mad about that, because if you were in the playoffs, George Pickens was deep on your bench. Like,
right.
there's your team had to have been good enough to not even be considering to play him, because he has been so disappointing. But I mean, I got him in a dynasty league, so you can look forward to that. But I think it just goes to show that we shit on Desmond Ridder a lot here, but Kenny Pickett is worse. Like, I think genuinely Kenny Pickett is probably worse. Like, the dude has been miserable, and even with Mason Rudolph, we saw George Pickens, and then obviously Deontay Johnson and his relationship with Mitchell Trubisky. I don't know if they're like, it goes deeper than that, but Pittsburgh, whether or not they make a head coaching change, they absolutely need to make a quarterback change.
Yeah, and they're going to be one that's really interesting to watch, because they're not really in a position to draft, one of the higher touted guys. It's going to be fascinating to see how many of these quarterbacks come draft time actually end up being like top 10 picks or so, because obviously the Steelers, their record is good enough, they're not going to have a top 10 draft pick. And how many of these guys, after Caleb Williams and Drake May, who are presumed top 2 or 3 picks, after them, how many of the Michael Penixes and Jaden Daniels end up going in that top 10, or will they be available in the teens and the 20s for a team like the Steelers? They're hoping so.
I think Penix probably will be, but there's so much. It's December. We've still got 4 months left until the draft. This could be a completely different story, but at least right now you'd think Daniels would, Penix maybe not, but
yeah, I'm a bit of a sicko. I'm very excited for all of just the smoke and the storylines that come out about the draft, mainly because it fuels so much of my content. It's just like what could happen. So yeah. I'm very excited as we head into a draft that is chock full of name brand quarterbacks, if nothing else. But yeah, George Pickens, like, look, if you had him on your bench, don't feel bad about it. I saw like this comment on Reddit, and I just need to stay the fuck off Reddit because people are insane. But somebody was like, oh, I left him on my bench because that's what all the experts said to do, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, motherfucker, every logical person on the face of this planet was benching George Pickens this week. Sometimes this shit just happens. Like, this is what can happen for any full-time wide receiver that plays a full complement of snaps. Like, they can pop off of a few. He had 4 catches. He only caught 4 balls for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that can happen to anybody. Don't feel bad about not seeing the future.
And that brings up a general thing. Matthew Berry had a bit of an interaction over the weekend where, like, someone was like, oh, thanks a lot, like, I started Diggs, and then this happens, and Matthew Berry just goes, listen, like, he had a 30% target share the last 2 weeks. He had a great matchup. Gabe Davis has been terrible, but Gabe Davis popped off. Mm-hmm. Like, that very well could have been Stephon Diggs, but more so, experts should not set your lineup.
Right.
You should set your lineup, and at the end of the day, it is still you. Obviously, taking as many opinions as you want, but, like, don't harass these people because, like, it's not like these people are pulling shit out of their ass saying, like, oh, this guy's going to go off this week. It's always based in some kind of matchup or, trends. Yeah, that irks me. That irks me a lot.
It's your job as a fantasy owner to do enough vetting to choose who you're going to trust. And so once you've chosen that you trust that person, don't get mad at them. And if you decide you no longer trust that person, that's fine. But, like, don't go off at them for a decision that you ultimately made. It's insane. I've had people in the past do that when I would do my, like, morning fantasy football streams. I remember there was a London game and somebody came in while I was streaming and was mad that, like, Jamison Crowder scored a touchdown, and I told them not to start Jamison Crowder. I'm like, buddy, fucking relax. I don't know what to tell you. We cannot see the future. You are the one that ultimately makes the final call. And yeah, George Pickens is not a final call that I'm sure a lot of people made with him being in their lineup. A lot of people put him on the bench, and it just it is what it is. I don't think George Pickens is a must-start player going forward either. Like,
absolutely not.
Like, this game was fluky as hell. Yeah, this game was, if you want to say, okay, let's try to ride the momentum of this game, then sure, if you don't have many good options for, like, a flex spot, but this is not a must-start player going forward by any means. No. Pat, so those 2 guys are obviously some massive league winners if you did have them in your lineup, Amari Cooper and George Pickens. Now, if you'll recall, we did our league winners draft a couple weeks ago.
Are you sure?
We didn't mention it last week because, it's not something we wanted to keep tabs on every single week, but I figured let's check in on it again because now we both kind of have some calls here that have gone well or not so well. So look, before the fantasy playoffs started, Pat and I drafted little squads of players we thought would be league winners. Here are their point totals over the last 2 weeks just to get a little temp check of how we've done. So my squad, my number one pick was Devon Achane, and that has just not gone well. The last 2 weeks, he has gone for 9.2 and 4.1. The Dolphins' run game has not been as potent as it has been in the past, and when it has been, it's been Raheem Mostert doing a little bit more of the lifting. So Devon Achane, I apologize if he's been in your lineup because he has not been good. Rashee Rice, 24.1 and 11.7 over the last 2 weeks. That one's gone pretty well as he has transitioned into being basically their only good receiver and is finally getting the playing time to match. Bijan Robinson.
Oh, dear.
Bijan, not single-handedly, but largely it was a big reason I got eliminated because he went for 0.4 last 2 weeks ago and then 19.2 this week. So, look, this week was okay, but yeah, that was a mixed bag from Bijan, obviously. Dak Prescott last 2 weeks, 6.06 and 18.62, and then Breece Hall, 2.8 and 43.1. So, look, I obviously had the archetype correct about players that have the chance to put up massive numbers because a lot of the guys I picked did so in 1 week and then did not do so in another week. So, I mean, Breece Hall is one that, like, if you are in a league with 2 week playoff matchups, like, he put up enough points in this 1 week to make up for the prior. But if you're not, you got eliminated with the 2 and then you had to watch him drop the 43, that sucks. But hey, still solid performances, mostly from the guys I drafted. And Pat, your guys have done a little bit better here over the last 2 weeks.
At least a little more consistent, at least, I would say.
Yeah, so look, Isaiah Pacheco last 2 weeks ago did not play, so that is what it is. But then he went for 10.6 again, not super great, but
and then got hurt again. Yeah,
it got hurt again. Yeah, so it happened. Noah Brown 22.2 and 6.8 the last 2 weeks, so one good game mixed in there. This past week, Nico Collins is back, so I mean the expectations were definitely lowered anyway. Trey McBride 20.2 and 9.1, solid outputs from him both weeks. I mean that's a tight end, right? So the 20 points you're thrilled with,
especially
and the 9 you'll live with. Trey McBride I think is gonna be a very popular tight end pick next year in fantasy football. Justin Fields 9.64 and 24.5, so big game and a pretty awful game. And then Keaton Mitchell, oof, your final pick. Salute to Keaton Mitchell, 10.8 and then IR. He went on IR in the game that he scored 10.8. RIP Keaton Mitchell. Hopefully he can get back to form eventually. I'd love to see his speed on full display if he can get healthy. But yeah, this is quite a squad we have here, Pat, of our attempted league winners.
Just a very mixed bag. Like, I think we have the right idea a lot of the time. I think it is just absolutely vile that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like maybe we'll draft the actual league winners after this, or have an award for the best league winner. And it's repulsive that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to win a lot of people a championship and not Isaiah Pacheco. But yeah, it's just I guess that's what happens when you kind of go for league winners, is that you're kind of basing it off of potential, and sometimes they hit their potential and sometimes they don't. You don't pick a consistent guy, like guy who's like, oh, he's going to score you 13 points both week. Like, no, you want to shoot for the stars with league winners. And I think that's what we did. And
definitely,
I'd say we missed, but we were close. I would say, just a couple of a little off kilter there, but
yeah, I mean, look, these guys could have just as easily gotten you eliminated as they won you a league. So it just depends on what combination of guys you had and who else you had around them. If your lineup was literally made of these guys, you probably just fell in the middle somewhere at some point because it's just such a mixed combination of performances, like truly awful and then truly great. But yeah, I just figured that would be a fun little thing to check in on there one more time. Pat, we had another round of just massive injuries. And, again, just a testament to, as we get later in the season, there's more mileage on these guys, and I think the injuries become, unfortunately, a little bit more likely. Obviously, the most devastating one of the week, TJ Hawkinson, torn ACL. He is done for the season, and this will put the beginning of next year in doubt. Look, if you've got TJ Hawkinson and you're in your fantasy championship, this sucks. Obviously,
I hope really bad.
I hope you have a tight end on your bench. This is once you hit fantasy playoffs, and maybe I should have mentioned this on a pod, but this is one strategy I like to try to do, is have a backup for every position once you get to that point, if you can help it. Just because you don't need those bench spots for really anything else. You don't need it for, an extra like a fifth running back or something like that. But make sure you have if you can, make sure you have a quality option as a backup for positions like quarterback and tight end. Do it. if you don't, look, we've highlighted a couple guys who could maybe be solid fill-ins, but losing TJ Hockenson sucks. There's no two ways about it. You're not going to get the reliability. You're not going to get the same even ceiling that TJ Hockenson can provide. But a couple guys here. Look, Chig Okonkwo, Gerald Everett, Tucker Kraft. Those are my top replacement options.
Our boy Chig, finally.
Yeah.
One of our biggest preseason memes. Finally catches a touchdown in week 16.
I know. I believe Chig, the stat was he's gone over 60 yards in 2 of his last 4 games, which he hadn't really done so at all in the first half of the season. So, look, these are all guys that you're kind of riding the wave a little bit. They're coming on a little bit more as the season draws to a close. And each of these guys, Okonkwo, Everett, and Kraft, have all gotten at least 6 targets in each of their last 3 games. So there's some sort of floor of volume there, right? And you're kind of just hoping that they can turn that into 40 yards and maybe a touchdown.
I feel like floor is the biggest thing for tight ends, especially at this point of the year. Like, I don't think you're going to be looking to replace TJ Hockenson with Josh Oliver or anyone else they have there. But, some of those guys that you listed are probably available because they haven't been like so good that, like you're not going to find an Isaiah Likely chilling on the waiver wire right now. It's going to be more of these kind of gross players here, But yeah, that's brutal because he's been really consistent. For damn sure, at the very least, the dude's going to have 6 catches. And that alone is a great tight end floor. So, yeah, brutal timing. Hopefully it doesn't dip too far into next season because if not, even with the kind of this tight end renaissance, I still feel like he's got to be a top 5 tight end going into next year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think if you had a fully healthy TJ Hockenson, you're looking at a top few tight ends of what? Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Hockenson, and then Kittle is probably the top 5, right? And then you get into the more upside guys like Trey McBride and I think Dawson Knox is under contract, so like Dalton Kincaid is still going to be a question of if he fully breaks out or if he just kind of keeps doing what we've seen him be doing here. But you've got, Jake Ferguson, you got David Njoku. I think tight end is going to be a lot deeper next year, at least to start the season out, than it has been in a while.
And you have guys too who, Pat's pal, Pat Freiermuth, who I still stand by, could be a solid tight end.
Oh, he's a very good player.
The QB play on that team has just been so bad, as we just talked about, and then Chig Okonkwo, and we're forgetting Brock Bowers here. Who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, and also, hate to say it, fellow top 10 pick, your boy Kyle Pitts. I think it's all going to depend on who's the coach there, who's the quarterback there, but I think it is far too soon to kind of bury his coffin. I think that that there's still a real chance that we enter next year with him being drafted as a tight end 1.
Yeah, honestly, I would expect it at this point for Pitts. He's put together a nice few games here to close out the year. The last couple of weeks, let's see, we're looking at last 4 weeks, we'll go 51 yards on 8 targets, 57 yards on 6 targets and a touchdown, 37 yards on 4 targets ain't much, but then 49 yards and another touchdown this past week. Yep. So, the touchdowns are starting to come a little bit for Kyle Pitts, and if this offense can actually get somebody who knows how to throw the fucking ball, that would be great. And yeah, Kyle Pitts' stock will certainly go up. It's funny, like this was kind of the buffer year for me with Pitts, where so many people were like, you're going to draft Kyle Pitts again, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I'm not. The situation's the exact same. But now it's like kind of reset, and I'm like, I could be in next year, depending on how things go.
We're still looking at someone who was, at the time, probably the best tight end prospect ever. And
right.
There's no indication to say that those skills still aren't there. It seems to be the extenuating circumstances around him. Hopefully we'll find out next year if that's actually the case or not.
Yeah, if he gets a quarterback that knows how to throw the damn ball and a coach that actually knows how and is willing to use him, it's a complete reshuffling of the deck for Kyle Pitts, and you're just looking at a guy who is super talented. I think the only question mark that would remain for him at that point is just the recovery from the knee injury, because there's a lot of speculation that the surgery and the recovery and the scarring that occurred because of it has kind of zapped some of his explosiveness, but still there's still a lot of talent there even underneath that. And I hope the best is yet to come for Kyle Pitts, and I do think that's absolutely
I think it is. I think it is.
I mean, look, it's hard to say that what he's done with Desmond Ridder is the peak of what we're going to see in his career. Like, that would be a pretty depressing reality unless he's just, like, completely injured every season. And that would be depressing in itself. So, yeah, let's hope that Kyle Pitts can put together a big year here eventually. As much as he's burned me, look, I don't root against players. I'm not a psychopath unless they're facing the Patriots in a given week where we're actually, competitive in a given season. We'll see if that ever happens again. But back to the point here. Yes, those are your tight end replacements for TJ Hockenson, and those are also your tight end replacements if you are a Cole Kmet owner in your fantasy championship. Now, Cole Kmet, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the nature of this injury is not fully disclosed yet. I mean, it is a knee injury, but we do not have the clarity that we have with Hockenson.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't seem like with Hockenson, it always seemed like there was the possibility, like it could be something as bad as an ACL, that what it was. Doesn't seem like that's really on the table here for Cole Kmet, but yeah, that's another tough one because I mean he had over 100 yards in the first half of that game, which alone right there, then and there, that's a great game for a tight end right there. And he's another guy that we've seen. He did kind of the same thing at the end of the year last year where he played really well. Like this is someone who's clearly showed some potential. Again, we'll see who's playing quarterback there next year. But it did allow me to learn that Mercedes Lewis is on the Bears. How the fuck?
He sure is. He sure is.
The one Aaron Rodgers first-round skill position player in his entire career as a Packer. That'll always be a great. He'll always be a trivia answer.
That is so funny. Yeah, he's there alongside another Aaron Rodgers pal, Robert Tonyan, as far as Bears tight end depth. So
I just learned that now.
Look, if the Bears end up being without Cole Kmet, it's similar to the Viking situation where your fantasy team is not replacing this player in-house. You are not going to a Bears tight end to try and replace Cole Kmet. Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis are not it. Do yourself a favor and go after the Chigs or the Everetts or the Tucker Crafts of the world instead, because that is just not the move. Cole Kmet, a guy, you're right, Pat, who's come on here at the end of the year just kind of like he did last year. I think he's just a super talented player. And again, if he can get consistently good QB play, I don't think Justin Fields is bad necessarily, but if he can get a really high volume passer here, maybe if the Bears do go another direction at quarterback, he could be a guy we're talking about as possibly a top 5 tight end finisher next year. He won't be drafted that way no matter what happens, but I could see him finishing there if things bounce the right way. And yes, the latest update on Cole Kmet from Matt Eberflus is we will see where that goes in terms of his movement. He had basically no update on the knee injury as of today, so have to keep it locked.
Certainly not optimistic though.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great, so certainly be evaluating your options. Pat, this is one of your boys, Isaiah Pacheco. We touched on it earlier. Left the game with a concussion. So obviously, this is just like I'm about to say this is just like every other concussion we've had this year. All concussions are the same. They're no different. No, you have to approach this the same way you have with any other concussed player all season, where it is completely wait and see. Players recover from this faster and slower than others all the time. Generally, it seems like a safe-ish bet that players miss a week if they suffer a concussion. So you're certainly thinking about what your options are if you are a Pacheco owner. Jerick McKinnon is on IR, so he is not an option anymore. And it is CEH time. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I hate that he's going to end up being one of the biggest league winners in fantasy football this year. It's painful.
And yeah, because we talked about like early in the year a little bit, even leading into the year, we're like, oh, Pacheco this, Pacheco that, CEH is bad. And I mean, granted, CEH has looked pretty good. At least 2 weeks ago, he had a great receiving week that made him one of the top performers of the week. But yeah, that's disgusting. And obviously one of the reasons I picked Pacheco as one of my league winners was the schedule. The Bengals, who I believe are 19th, I think. I looked earlier today. Don't know why I didn't write it down. 19th against running back. So pretty good, favorable matchup at the very least. But you know what's funny about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I'm going to age myself here. I don't know if we have any Prince fans listening, but Prince has the song Raspberry Beret. And every time I hear Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's name, I always think of it like that. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Every time for years now. For years.
I've never even heard that song before, but I understand the sentiment that you're going
So
for.
if we've got any old timers listening, if any of you are over the age of 15, whoops, no, that's not. We love you guys. If there's any old timers that I still don't know if we have any old timers, any Prince fans, shout out. Anyone in the chat right now, shout out. But yeah. That's just a funny Clyde Edwards-Helaire thing, but absolutely disgusting. And he's going to be a three down back as well. He was out there on the third downs this past week when Pacheco was in the game or not. He was in there on third down, so there's a real chance he's a 3-down back going into the fantasy championship with a favorable matchup. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen.
I was going to say I'm curious who the other random name is that they have on their depth chart, because obviously they're not going to head into this game with one running back.
Is it still
active.
LaMichael Pirine?
It's LaMichael Pirine.
Oh,
yeah.
dear.
I don't know. I wonder if the Chiefs have anybody else on their practice. It's really just, it could not possibly be less important. But
so maybe Pirine might be out there a little bit on third downs, but
yeah,
this is going to be the CEH show.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody. I can't find the practice squad. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It was just for my own curiosity. But yes, CEH, if you own him, he is definitely a guy you can plug into your lineup, assuming Pacheco misses the game. If you are a Pacheco owner without CEH, good luck, I guess. You could possibly pick up one of these other guys that we're about to touch on. We got a few more running back injuries here who there are, replacement options that could be viable for you. Next one we got on here, Pat, is Brian Robinson with that hamstring injury. So obviously, in our pod early last week, it seemed like Brian Robinson had a chance to be on track to return. But look, we record this pod on Tuesday. There's a lot of days of practice left to occur after that, and things develop. And Brian Robinson did not return to practice last week. So that naturally led to him not playing. And the backfield was left up to Chris Rodriguez and Antonio Gibson. And Chris Rodriguez had a little bit of a breakout game. Now, this was a guy who was on radars, before the season as somebody who could earn a role because there was a decent amount of uncertainty in this Commanders backfield. We knew that nobody was really a standout player from a talent perspective, at least not that we had seen. And then Brian Robinson popped off and, relegated Rodriguez to third string duties. But now Chris Rodriguez, considering with him only having Antonio Gibson as competition, was able to have a very nice day and kind of emerge, I think, and show people that he's probably just the better player to Antonio Gibson. He ended up with 10 carries for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns to Gibson's 9 for 30 and 1 touchdown.
Or at the very least, a better runner than Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson is probably a better pass catcher, but if Chris Rodriguez is out as well, if you're desperate, yeah, you've got to start Antonio Gibson as the only clear guy to get touches there, but he is just not very good at this point in his career, at least as a runner. But at that point, you're just hoping that Washington's really bad, and maybe they'll have to throw it a good amount, and he can kind of make his money catching the ball. But yeah, and I'm not even super thrilled about Chris Rodriguez because this team has just been so bad. They've just been really bad. They made it interesting, but yeah, this is another case where yeah, I would stay away. No, I would stay away if you can, but I feel like in a lot of times you may not be able to.
Yeah, some people may not have that luxury. Here's the thing. If everything was normal, I would say let's assume Brian Robinson's out. I would go with Chris Rodriguez over Antonio Gibson. But we've got another fun little wrinkle to this, as Chris Rodriguez was spotted with a walking boot on after the game and is actually set to have an MRI. So we do not know what the health status is of Chris Rodriguez and if this could just be the Antonio Gibson show. This is another team where Pat, do we know who the fuck else would be next in line for touches?
Probably Curtis Samuel.
That's probably. Okay. According to the ESPN depth chart, Pat, we've got Derek Gore. Can I get a Derek Gore on aisle 1?
Oh.
So
didn't he pop off 1 week for the Chiefs 2 years ago?
Yes, I believe
because I remember I was a Damian Williams owner at that point because that was when CEH was hurt, and I was a Damian Williams owner. It was a Monday night game. And Derek Gore had all the touches, and I remember just being furious. Oh no, it wasn't Damian Williams; it was Darrell Williams, even just to date things a little more. But yeah, I didn't know he was still in the league. And then I remember he pulled a Jonas Gray and just never got a touch again in Kansas City after just for some reason being the lead back that 1 week. That's a blast from the past that I did not want to remember. I remember that vividly. They played the Giants. I do not know how I remember that this clairvoyantly.
No, I do too. And look, this was only 2 years ago, and I have the stat line up. His Jonas Gray moment was definitely a lot less Jonas Gray because it was 11 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. Truthfully, the touchdown is what saved the day, but that did result.
At least from a touches perspective.
Yeah, definitely resulted in a good enough performance. He had another game against the Raiders later that year, 9 for 66 and a touchdown. I don't know exactly what the circumstances were there, but look, the Derek Gore performance was in my era, even just a couple years ago, where I thought every running back that popped up due to depth issues was going to be gold. I thought I was a genius for going after the guy that was just like became the de facto starter. It's like Derek Gore is going to go crazy. He's going to go for 200 yards. But thankfully, I've grown a little bit since then. That was one of the years that I won a championship, though, so maybe I need to get back to that. Yes, Derek Gore had a big game there. I don't expect Derek Gore to have a big game here, but look, it would be a very funny moment. It would be a very funny moment to come back to if we've got Derek Gore scoring touchdowns for the Commanders this week. Look, if Chris Rodriguez and Brian Robinson are both out, unironically, Derek Gore will get a few touches, but he should not be. He should not be in fantasy lineups. It's a fun anytime touchdown bet, if nothing else. If literally any sports book out there offers that, I have no idea if they will. They may just ignore the existence of Derek Gore, which is probably what you should do as well. So again, monitor Brian Robinson's health. We still got some practices to go. Maybe he could end up coming back this week. If he doesn't, let's go with Chris Rodriguez, but he might not be healthy. It's a mess in this Commanders backfield. If you have other options, go that direction for sure. Another running back option that you could have is Zamir White. Now, after the past 2 weeks, he's certainly likely to be available in much fewer leagues, but if he's still out there, yes, go get him.
I don't even think he should have been available unless you kind of prematurely dropped him because it looked like Jacobs was trending to play before the Saturday illness popped up. Like maybe that's the only reason Zamir White's out there in some leagues. But I mean, I think a thing that is being missed in this Raiders game yesterday was after the first quarter, they did not complete a pass. Yeah. So it was the Zamir White show, and Zamir White, I don't even want to say he carried them to victory because like it was the defense, but he was the lone bright spot. And that's 2 weeks in a row. We were kind of, even going into the season, we were like, Zamir White's nothing, this and that. But 2 weeks in a row, he's shown he's a competent running back. I mean, Josh Jacobs is still Josh Jacobs, but it seems like they have another good, decent contributor there in Las Vegas. But again, you start him if Josh Jacobs doesn't play. But it seems like he's going to. It seems like he's going to because it seems like now the illness is the thing. But for whatever reason, if something happens again, I think Zamir White is close to a must start with how bad the Las Vegas passing game is.
So bad they reverted back to Oakland.
Yeah, so bad they've been blown into Oakland.
Zamir White is a guy that I've always been interested in because one metric I always look at just to kind of gauge a player's ceiling is their relative athletic score, the RAS score. And you can look this up for any player. And it's kind of just like, it's a decent indicator of if a player has like breakout potential, and it's not an exact science. I remember mentioning it on a podcast way back, but like Trent Richardson's RAS score was like 9.8 out of 10, so like he was crazy. But it's just a good look into players that you may not know much about. It's like, all right, is this guy somebody with a ton of athleticism, or is this a guy that's just going to be in a volume role, and you hope that he can take some of these touches, and he's not necessarily much stronger or faster than anybody else. So Zamir White is another guy who his score, it was like also like a 9.8, so he's a very high ceiling player. So I've liked him. I've just kind of been waiting to see if he can get some touches here, and it's been fun to see him get these. So not sure if he'll get another week of these touches. If he does, yes, he should absolutely be in your lineups. Pat, a couple of injuries that are guys that didn't play even last week. Jamar Chase still nursing that shoulder injury, may be out again. Honestly, the lesson here is just to fire up T. Higgins. Obviously, it's a slight boost for guys like Andre Yoshivash. I think I got that pronunciation right.
Hell yeah,
and Tyler Boyd, I guess. Yeah, Trent and Irwin. Those guys will see a few more looks, but it's going to be hard to feel good about any of them in your lineup unless it's a super deep league. But T. Higgins popping off, and I mean, shouldn't expect anything less if Jamar Chase misses another game. And then we've got Keenan Allen with a heel injury. Still don't know if he is going to return. And Josh Palmer is the main beneficiary. But look, this is an Easton Stick-led offense. Josh Palmer last week led the team with, I believe, like 56 receiving yards. So understand that is the limited sort of... Not limited ceiling, because I mean he had a pretty high ceiling in that game against the Raiders that they got blown out, but it's just it's a lower upside play for sure for any Chargers receiver.
Yeah, you could definitely do worse than Josh Palmer, but you can hopefully, if you're in the championship, hopefully you can do better.
Yeah, waivers are barren. If Josh Palmer's out there, then sure, go grab him. But like otherwise, he's just not a super exciting play at this point in the season. And we've got some new injuries though from this week as well. Jalen Waddle, potential high ankle sprain. I don't believe it's been confirmed yet, but Mike McDaniel said that this was what they were believing it was for Jalen Waddle. Look, Waddle has been banged up absolutely all season. He still managed to put up some solid games here and there.
Seems like he leaves the field every game.
It does. I get
back this past week.
Yeah, I get the little like fantasy life notification every Sunday. I think Jalen Waddle headed to blue injury tent. I'm like, motherfucker needs to just build a house in there. The thing with Dolphins receivers, and we talked about this when Tyreek was questionable and did end up missing a game. There's just no clear beneficiary on this day. The beneficiary is the other starting receiver as long as they're not both hurt.
We could see an Amari Cooper-esque game from Tyreek Hill this week.
Yeah, we could.
To be completely honest. I mean, we've seen games close to it with Jalen Waddle. And then, like you said, we saw Jalen Waddle have a huge week, 20-plus points, I believe, last week when Tyreek was out. And Tyreek's the better player. So, yeah, you don't even consider. Like, there's no one even on the Dolphins worthy of mentioning their name. It is just...
Yeah.
If you have Tyreek Hill, you probably are in the championship game. And by God, he's going to do what he's done all year, and he's going to carry you.
Yeah, the only other player that I will offer up here, and this
if
is
you say Chase
league...
Claypool, I'll put my fist through my laptop.
I'm not. If your league is somehow so barren at the tight end position, Durham Smythe is an okay dart. Okay dart, not a great dart. Definitely below the other guys we mentioned earlier, but I'm just saying.
Gun to my head, and I have to pick another Dolphin. Yeah, I would probably say Durham Smythe, but.
It's disgusting. It's absolutely gross. But it's like if the best tight end available in your league is like, no shade to my own team, but like Mike Gesicki or something like that, like go with Durham Smythe.
If you're a 16-teamer and had T.J. Hawkinson or Cole Kmet, then maybe, but.
Right, exactly, yeah. Smythe had 5 catches for 56 yards on 5 targets this past week. It's the only reason I bring it up. So, yeah, it's still, you're not going to be excited about that. Another injury we had, Jordan Addison suffered an ankle injury. Seems like he is going to be week to week. And, with him and T.J. Hawkinson both down, you talk about the big week potentially for Tyreek Hill. Big week for Justin Jefferson as well coming up. But somebody else is going to be catching the ball here. This just revives KJ Osborne for another one of his decent floor type of weeks that he could have.
Yeah, I like, in comparison, I like Osborne a lot better than Josh Palmer, for example, because, I mean, that's a lot of targets that Hawkinson and Addison take up that, granted, Jefferson will, be the prime benefactor, but I do think that KJ Osborne is a far more viable flex play dart throw than Josh Palmer or, God forbid, Durham Smythe.
Yeah, and this will be an interesting week for the Vikings as well because they said, Kevin O'Connell said they are considering all options at quarterback, and maybe this is the excessive optimist in me. I think this means we're going to get a change to Jaren Hall. And I don't know that that's going to happen, and I don't know for a fact that it's going to be an upgrade. We've only seen him for a brief quarter where he looked pretty good, but I don't think it's going to be worse than Nick Mullins. That's my hot take. So I think we could get a decent performance here from a guy like KJ Osborne because Jaren Hall should hopefully prop up that pass game just a little bit from what we've seen lately with Nick Mullins. Because, man, Nick Mullins just looks fucking confused.
It's just, Nick Mullins has got to be one of the worst decision makers we've seen on the field this year. That's the thing. Like, he'll throw for a good amount of yards. He can make a good play, but, like, there's just a lot of just shocking throws that whether they went for an interception or not, that were just baffling.
His face is also just goofy and makes me mad. So get him out of the lineup. I'm sick of it. All right, and then another injury we had here. Cortland Sutton also dealing with a concussion, so we don't know what his availability is going to look like. Look, this is one where the one-to-one replacement is not necessarily who you'd expect. I'm sure a lot of people want this to be a Marvin Mims explosion or at least a bump in playing time. That's not what happened in the game against the Patriots. Brandon Johnson basically took Sutton's snaps 1-for-1, got a decent chunk of targets too. And Pat, I watched this man drop a ball basically right in front of my face. Brandon Johnson's not very good. So if you're looking for purely a volume dart throw, I guess. But no, you can do better than Brandon Johnson because he is the main beneficiary. Nobody else is really getting a bump from the Cortland Sutton being out.
You're not even liking Jerry Jeudy at all here.
I just don't like Jerry Jeudy. How about that?
The only Bronco that I think you're going to be at least any bit enthusiastic about starting is Javonte Williams. I believe that's 2 weeks in a row now he's found the end zone. So. I guess Russ, but even that one is more of a borderline startable guy.
Yeah, I mean, Cortland Sutton went out of that game fairly early, and this was, oh God.
Oh yeah, I got the box score up too.
This is the
Heinous.
distribution. Everyone just had 5 or 4 targets, and everyone just had between 20 and 63 yards, and it's disgusting. You've got names in here, especially Lucas Krull. That's not a real person. Lucas Krull's not a real person. There were a few guys this week
that caught touchdowns that in the moment I'm like, I actually don't know who that is. Some what was it, like Jason Brownlee on the Jets as well? I'm like, who the fuck is that guy?
I actually do know who Jason Brownlee is because he had a lot of preseason hype. Everyone kind of knew he wasn't going to get any playing time once the season started, but he was like popping off in preseason games, so I did know who that was. Pat, Lucas Krull he scored in this game, right?
Yes, he did.
Forgetting. So Lucas Krull had a touchdown. When I was sitting in the stands for that game, the Browns announced 2 tight ends as starters. Neither one was Lucas Krull. So if that's not a good indication of just how gross the receiving and tight end room is without Cortland Sutton, even with Cortland Sutton.
Who was the second one?
Chris Manhertz.
Chris Manhertz.
They announced Chris Manhertz first, and I was confused because I was like, what happened to this? Like, I know Greg Dulcich is hurt. I was like, what happened? And then they said Adam Troutman. I was like, oh, okay. They ended up announcing like 12 or 13 players as starters, which I'm like, that's not how starting works, but whatever they want to do to give guys some shine. Yeah, Chris Manhertz and Adam Troutman were announced as the, I suppose, the 12 personnel starters, but no sign of Lucas Krull until he ended up finding the fucking end zone. So... Yeah, start a Bronco at your own peril if you want with Cortland Sutton being out, but there's 0 slam dunk plays here. But Pat, I think that takes care of our injuries. There was only 65 of them, so sorry you guys had to.
What a miserable year for injuries, man. Just horrible.
It is bad. I'm looking forward to, I mean, I guess next year, but we just know there's going to be more injuries to different players next year. But I'm looking forward to the reset and optimism that we can have over, mostly fully healthy rosters as we head into next year. But that'll do it for kind of the fantasy analysis that we've got here right now until we get to our viewer questions where we'll have a little bit more. But I did want to touch on and talk about the playoff scenarios now because, look, this Ravens-Niners game, we'll talk about that first, had a lot of implications for how people view, I think, the Super Bowl favorites coming into these last few weeks. And Pat, I'll just ask you this. What is your initial reaction to how that game played out and how you view the Ravens and Niners now going forward?
I don't think it's more so even of a like a playoff implications. I think my reaction is that Lamar Jackson is the MVP of this league. We've seen candidate after candidate pop up and absolutely step on their own dicks. Whether it be Brock Purdy. I personally didn't take the Brock Purdy hype seriously. A lot of people are. I forgot somebody. I saw somebody call him like someone ridiculous, like compare him to someone ridiculous, and I'm just like, okay, like come on. But you understand in the San Francisco system, most quarterbacks are gonna succeed in that system. It was Dak Prescott at one point, and he's had a couple down games. I feel like I would be surprised if they give it to Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey, even though we've talked about it all season, them being very viable candidates. It seems like if this is going to be a quarterback award, then it seems like it's Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, if it's a quarterback award, I think you're probably right. I mean, look, statistically, Dak Prescott is still right there, but it's going to be hard to give the MVP to a quarterback of a wild card team, which is looking like still what the Cowboys may end up being as they hand this division back to the Eagles. Especially if the Ravens are the 1 seed.
Yeah,
I hesitate to feel comfortable giving MVP to Lamar because, I know stats aren't everything, obviously, but it's just been such an underwhelming season for him statistically, especially compared to his last MVP season. No quarterback has statistically been all that great this year, and that's been a theme all year. The ones that even start to seem like they're emerging, like you said, they kind of fall back down to earth. Maybe that'll happen to Lamar this week, and that would make the conversation even more difficult. But to me, I feel like it should be Christian McCaffrey that gets the MVP. I feel even stronger about that now. If you check the sports books, I checked FanDuel earlier, and McCaffrey's actually second now in odds. I believe it's Lamar is like minus 170, and then McCaffrey is like plus 460. So, I mean, Lamar is heavily favored still because of it being a quarterback award. But, I just don't – the numbers just aren't there. Like, Lamar has been
It certainly
he's
pales
been a
in
steady
comparison.
presence. Yeah, he's Lamar's been a steady presence. He's captained that team very well, but like the Ravens are this elite of a team also because their defense has been so good. And it's like, not to take anything away from Lamar, but it's like MVP is something that rewards crazy statistics and you having a monumental year. And I think the team is having a monumental year and Lamar is doing a damn good job captaining that ship. It just doesn't feel like an MVP campaign to me. I would rather give it to McCaffrey. But
and that's completely fair. But I think another thing that we saw like Rich Eisen threw a subtle jab about this, that bet a lot of those teams that were colluding with the Ravens to not sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet in the offseason are probably not very happy at all. Because, I remember we got a viewer question at the time. This was in the infancy of the Pat and Bran off the bench. And I remember giving like a very timid yes that I thought it was collusion. But just the thing about the NFL and how the owners, how a lot of the owners are like, it has to be like, why would the Falcons or the Raiders or the Panthers or any team like that could have had a shot at Lamar Jackson without giving up assets at least, or at least force the Ravens' hand into saying, yeah, we're gonna sign him now. You got to match it. Probably feeling awfully silly right now.
It's just crazy, and it. Even in hindsight is so much worse, especially for the Falcons, because I remember them being the team that it was like heavily publicized. We are not pursuing Lamar Jackson, and everyone was like, "Why?" Like your team is built. Your team is built to compete outside of the quarterback position, and it kind of just left us to be like, "All right, well, I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe they think Ritter's that good, or he's going to take a step." No, it's even goofier by 10x in hindsight that they did not at least try to get Lamar Jackson away from the Ravens. So, yes, look, just because I don't think he's going to be the MVP does not mean I don't believe he's not one of the best quarterbacks in football. He absolutely is and could easily steer the Ravens to another Super Bowl championship. They may have to go through Joe Flacco to do it. That'd be a hell of a storyline. But, that game, it was definitely a reality check or a come back down to earth moment for the Niners, because it's like we haven't seen the Niners really face much adversity since that 3-game losing streak they had early on in the year. And it was like, okay, they figured it out. They've got all these skilled players. They have an elite defense. Like they can't get manhandled. They don't have the roster that makes that possible. And then you look, and now you kind of get reminded that Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. But what happens when he faces a team with also a very good defense, not as good of skill players, but still good skill players, and an elite quarterback? Because that's what Lamar Jackson is. And now you wonder just how, if this were the rematch that we got in the Super Bowl, what adjustments are the 49ers going to make so that weakness doesn't get exploited as much as it did? And a lot of it's on Brock Purdy. He said he has to improve, and I'm very interested to see what kind of developments and steps forward he takes as we get into the playoffs here.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen the 49ers scuffle. They, like we said, they lost 3 games to the Bengals, the Browns, and the Vikings, I think. So, teams that they probably should have beaten. Those weren't nearly as much on Purdy as this one is, but we've seen them bounce back. They looked like the surefire best team in football until last night.
Yeah.
So we've seen them bounce back before, and who's to say they won't just do it again and still make a run at the Super Bowl, but for being as good of a team as they are, that's a pretty glaring weakness. Like, teams that are that good should not have that important of a weakness.
Yeah, I really do hope we get this as the rematch in the Super Bowl. And I mean, look, the conspiracy about the Super Bowl logo says that we might, where the colors of the logo apparently represent who's going to be in it. People have been saying all year Niners Ravens because it's got a little red on one side, a little purple on another side. I would be so interested to see what the next move is in that chess match, because Mina Kimes pointed out on Twitter that the Niners are the biggest yak team, yards after catch, in the NFL, which that should come as a surprise to literally no one. But the Ravens are the best team at limiting yards after the catch, and they made it very clear they were able to just make tackles that no other team has been able to. They can't. The Niners could not get a lot of those screen passes and short passes off the ground, and they just got stopped at the line of scrimmage, and that was that. And then the Ravens did the rest. So I would be very, very excited to see that rematch in the Super Bowl, because I do think the Niners 49ers will come with some kind of counterpunch. It's just a matter of what that counterpunch will be, and can both of these teams take care of business in their respective conferences. But look, there are going to be roadblocks in each of these conferences, and as we get closer to the playoffs, I think we can start a little bit to evaluate who these playoff teams are going to be and how strong they're looking. One thing I'll say about the NFC is the Cowboys and Eagles are both kind of trending down right now. Neither team is really firing on all cylinders, and it's making me very curious to see how their first-round games end up going, assuming neither one ends up with the first-round bye.
Especially since Tampa has started to look really solid the last couple of weeks. I'm not going to say really good. I'm going to say really solid. Like, it doesn't seem like it's going to be the kind of pushover game that we have sort of been hyping up these last few weeks. But yeah, the Eagles got really lucky to get away with what they did there. I mean, it got them taking Tommy shits his pants out of the game for the Giants to get back in that, but they had no business. They had no business being in that game. The Eagles are just like a complacent football team, it feels like right now. Like, they're not a bad football team by any stretch, but it just seems like they're just kind of on cruise control, and you face a good team in the playoffs, possibly in the first round, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough, especially to make the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. I just don't think that's going to be it.
Yeah, they haven't shown any signs of, like, this can be the best team in the NFC, which is what we thought they had the chance to be, or honestly were already favored to be coming into this year. They got walloped by the Niners a few weeks ago, and now they are just failing to make any kind of statement against good or bad teams lately. So, yeah, I think, look, as of right now, it would be Bucks versus Cowboys, I guess, in Tampa. I think, personally, Bucks-Eagles would be a lot more fascinating of a matchup, because with the Eagles struggling in their secondary so much, having Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and gunslinger Baker Mayfield able to attack that weakness would be super interesting. But either way, the Bucks are very much trending the right way at the right time. So I'm curious to see what that matchup ends up being, because the Cowboys and Eagles both faltering. The Cowboys have now lost back-to-back games, granted to good teams, but like, you're supposed to be on their level, if not above their level. So why are they losing both these games to the Bills and the Dolphins? Like, you're going to face good teams in the playoffs. Do you have what it takes to beat 4 straight to win the Super Bowl? Like, it doesn't seem that way right now. Cowboys and Eagles both trending poorly. And then in the AFC, Pat, the Chiefs. I mean, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Chiefs facing your Raiders. What the fuck did you make of that game?
Well, the I made of that game is that the Chiefs just shot themselves in the foot, because they don't make those 2 mistakes, then they win that game comfortably. That Raiders offense out, in the passing game, like I said, they didn't complete a pass after the first quarter of a football game they won. And the Chiefs honestly got a little lucky, because they had that interception overturned. The Raiders had another pick of Mahomes, which would have set them up again with solid field position, that got overturned. And it was close. I mean, like, fuck if I know what a catch, fuck if I know what a catch is. Even just like, I felt like Tony Romo watching the replay, where I was just like, just making a bunch of noises, like, but they got lucky there, but they shot themselves in the foot. And fun fact, if the Raiders win the next 2 games and the Chiefs lose the next 2 games, the AFC West champion is the Raiders. Do I think that is going to happen? No. I don't even think it's going to come that close to happen. Raiders got to go at the Colts, home against Denver. Should get, you'd think they could beat Denver at home. And I think the Chiefs have the Bengals and the Chargers, so.
They do.
But, I was saying, in that moment right after that game, I'm saying to myself, like, God, like, if only they could have beaten Pittsburgh when McDaniels had that just absolutely hilarious field goal attempt. They're down 8. And, they, like, lay an egg against the Bears. It's like, had they only did that, they'd be in the playoff hunt. But then after the game, I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm just like, God, thank God they didn't win some of those games, because this is still not a playoff team. This is still not a playoff team, and they would get their doors blown off, regardless, had they made the playoffs. So a little relieved, but the biggest takeaway, Mark Davis, you made your mistake once. You absolutely have to hire Antonio Pierce. You absolutely have to hire Antonio Pierce. Because one, you don't have to tear it down. If you go out again, you're going to have to tear it down. Those GM and the coach are going to want to bring in their own players. You can keep a lot of it. Look how good that defense has been with him and Patrick Graham under the helm the last half of the season. And keep GM as well. Keep as much in place as you possibly can. from this team, but the fight they've shown, and especially their defense has been fantastic. Like, I understood it with our boy Uncle Rich Bisaccia, why they kind of moved on. 61 years old, never been a head coach before. I get that. There's no excuse. There is no excuse. Antonio Pierce is the man to help lead this franchise out of proverbial purgatory.
Let me pose this question to you, because I don't know if this will come to pass. But say you get to a point where they can interview Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald of the Ravens. You'd rather keep Antonio Pierce than go for one of these guys? Okay.
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Even though we're looking at two really good, head coaches, Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin could very well be on the market. I think Sean McDermott probably saved his ass and will probably keep his job there. 3-0, by the way, since he said he worshipped Al Qaeda. So, take notes, NFL coaches.
Oh no!
But even with those two guys on the market, I think Antonio Pierce is the right way to go for this team. He's young. He can be there for a long time, and more importantly, you don't want to have to tear down this roster for the third time in 6-7 years. That's the bigger thing for me, continuity. And I think you've got, maybe, if not the right guy, at least a good guy, a good option here. And I just don't think Mark Davis is going to make the same mistake twice, because they'll hire someone stupid for the name. They'll hire, God, I don't know, Doug Marrone. Is he still coach?
They're going to hire Jeff Saturday. He's tired of doing TV again.
But no, and Antonio Pierce is a name, so maybe that's why, maybe that's the reason Davis can do this. But that's the biggest thing to take away from this Raiders team yesterday and all season, is just that it's Aiden O'Connell's the problem, sadly. I don't think anyone ever expected him to be anything, but they need to go into next season, whether it be free agency, trade, draft, they need a quarterback, because Aiden O'Connell's not it.
It's time for the Jamarcus Russell comeback. We've been waiting for it, and now is his time. We have a spot for him. We have the opportunity. Let's get him in there. He's ready, Pat. I remember there was so many vignettes and hype videos about his potential comeback, and then it just didn't fucking happen, which is just very funny to me. But yes, the Raiders taking down the Chiefs, making the Chiefs. It's a hilarious POV from Raiders fans, but this is the Chiefs' rock bottom as far as this incarnation of them. Losing to the Raiders has made the Chiefs face that reality.
That was Mahomes' first loss against an AFC opponent in November or later in his career.
Wow.
That's insane. 19-0. He was 19-0 in division games in November or later. That's ridiculous. I hope they took the tour bus, the team bus around the stadium like they did a few years ago under John Gruden's guidance, and then got the doors blown off a few weeks later. I hope they did that again. I believe, as a small podcast, we're able to kind of see the comments. A few weeks ago, someone said my anti-Chiefs bias was showing, which I don't really care about the Chiefs, but L, bozo.
Yeah, that is a hell of a loss at home to the Raiders here.
They are still a significantly more successful franchise than the Raiders will ever be.
Well, yeah, we knew that, but Tuck rule, whatever. The Chiefs now, do you know who the Chiefs would be set up to face if the playoffs started today?
So what are they, the 4 or the 5 seed? Or the 3 or the 4 seed, excuse me.
The Chiefs are currently the 3.
Oh, is it Buffalo?
It's Buffalo. It would be Chiefs, folks. Bills in Kansas City, and as things stand, the Bills may win that game 45-7. These teams could not be going more opposite ways.
Motivational speaker lined up for him here. This is gonna make some. Would be because the Bills control their own destiny, and things have actually worked out in their favor a little bit more since then. Now that they've gotten a game up on teams like Indianapolis and Houston, but they are certainly going to make the playoffs. And Sean McDermott, all jokes aside, has saved his job, whether he should or not, whether they should move on regardless. But you'd think it'd be hard for them to move on from him after the way they've rallied at the end of the year. And we'll see, they're still a really talented roster. Maybe Ken Dorsey was just the problem. We all were like, Ken Dorsey's getting scapegoated. And then, granted, James Cook vanished. He said bye-bye to his what's the meme where the dude's just like, and then just disappears. That was James Cook.
Peace sign and disappears.
That was James Cook this last week, but they still won the game, so I don't think they give a shit how they won it.
No, certainly not. James Cook said, I'm a head out, but it didn't matter. Yeah, the Bills' last 5 games, look, since their loss to the Broncos 24-22, they beat the hell out of the Jets 32-6, lost to the Eagles in Philly by 3 points. So whatever, beat the Chiefs, beat the Cowboys, beat the Chargers. So the Bills are certainly trending the right way, and that would be a hell of a... I wish the playoff matchups were locked in right now, because there are so many great storyline matchups going on. There's between that, and then you've got Rams-Lions out in the NFC, which I would kill for that matchup. I'm praying that stays locked in. Such great ratings matchups here.
Who wins the AFC South? Because the Jaguars are scuffling with Trevor Lawrence. And now it seems very likely they're going to be without Trevor Lawrence, possibly for the rest of the way.
You're right. Yeah.
And here's the thing, with the way Cleveland is playing, say things hold and they do win the division, and then either Cleveland or Buffalo is the 5 seed, good night. Like, you're going to lose a home game. Let's see. Obviously the Colts play. Yeah. Colts play the Raiders. We'll pulling up these matchups.
The Colts play the Raiders and then the Texans. So there's Colts-Texans division matchup week 18, which could be massive.
This would be the thing that would save the Jags here, is that they are home against the Panthers and at the Titans. So that may be their saving grace here, is that their last 2 games are still, even with C.J. Beathard, you'd still think they've got to win those games with what they've got. But really trending downwards. Out of anyone in the league, I don't think anybody is free-falling the way the Jags do, and I do not like their longevity in the playoffs. After, thinking, I think a lot of people were thinking at the beginning of the year that this was a contender to possibly, win the AFC, but now, no.
Yeah, I mean, Pat, the Panthers are fighting too. Like, if they play a Trevor Lawrence-less Jags team, I don't think that's an automatic win for the Jags.
It's true, because they don't have their draft pick. So they've got everything to play for.
Right. The Panthers just lost to the Packers by the skin of their teeth, 33-30, after coming off of their second win of the season, 9-7 over the Falcons. I think that game is very winnable for Carolina against the Jags. And so this division, as much as we joke about the NFC South, I mean, the AFC South isn't bad, but it's just as congested as the NFC South has been for most of the year. I would love to see the CJ Stroud Texans end up making it in as division champs after all that has happened this season. So that would be a hell of a way to shift things up. But, Pat, one team that will not be making the playoffs that I do want to talk about here is my New England Patriots. Now,
moment of silence.
Obviously, your Las Vegas Raiders had a hell of a headline this week, beating the Kansas City Chiefs. My Patriots had a hell of a headline as well, severely damaging the Broncos' playoff hopes, but also severely damaging our own draft pick. I'm trying to come to terms with it, right, Pat? Because the NFL draft ultimately is very much a crapshoot. We don't know what the fuck's going to happen. Like, you can look at the top QBs in this draft, which as of right now are Caleb Williams and Drake May, and say, yes, those two are wildly above every other prospect. And then you think back to other drafts where we thought that was the case. Trevor Lawrence has not been the generational player that he was supposed to be at the top of his draft class. Could still get there, but it's been several years now.
Billed is the best prospect since Andrew Luck, and he has certainly not lived up to expectations. I'm still not ready to close the book on that, but still,
me neither.
With what he was at that point, I mean, like, Joe Burrow has been miles and miles better of a first overall pick than Trevor Lawrence is. And yeah, I mean, I hear some people are like, skeptics on Caleb Williams, which I'm just like, ugh, like, you think the Bears should not take Caleb Williams at 1, assuming they have it. Like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, I've tried to – I think I wanted us to have a top 2 pick more for the novelty of, like, okay, I'm a Patriots fan. I never thought we'd be at this point ever. And it'll just be cool to be, like, at the very top of the draft conjecture and have a top 2 pick. I think at the end of the day, being at number 4 is not necessarily a huge deal. Just mentioned how Trevor has not been the generational prospect we wanted him to be. Burrow has. And then you go down and you see the guys who are considered to be like the top quarterbacks in their class. Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold getting picked ahead of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. How'd that go? Bryce Young getting picked ahead of C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson so far. How's that going? So many examples you can look at here, and it's just another reminder that the draft is a crapshoot. I wasn't necessarily attached to any specific quarterback because I haven't looked into any of their tape or anything like that to see who I would really prefer. So all I'm rooting for at this point is a good draft, whatever that means, a hard reset for the Patriots. And to me, the worst case scenario here is honestly that Bailey Zappi plays out of his mind for the next 2 weeks and the Patriots think that they don't need a quarterback or they don't spend a top 2 round pick on a quarterback. If we wait for like round 4 or 5 to take a quarterback and we try to stockpile weapons and we draft like Joe Alt at tackle and, great tackle. Trust me, we need linemen. I understand. But like, if we try to just build this offense around Zappi, I don't think that's the move. This seems to be this seems to be a fairly loaded quarterback class, at least as much as you can get. And so that's all I want. It's fine that we don't get Drake May or Caleb Williams if that's what it comes down to. But I just want the hard reset. Bailey Zappi, please either be truly great or be ass for these next 2 weeks, because I do not want you to bamboozle us into thinking that you can be the guy and then we try to build around you and end up in 6-11 purgatory for the rest of forever. So that's where I'm at. I famously had my Williams or May jersey that I was wearing at the Broncos game, and of course I ended up jinxing us out of drafting either of those players, but that's just my luck. So all hope is not lost for me as a Patriots fan. That's just kind of the state of the union here. I'm looking very much forward to the draft here in a few months after these exciting playoffs play out, which I am still excited for, even though my team will not be in it. Pat, let's finish things up with our viewer questions. Let me hit our only sound effect of the show.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from.
Okay, our first question. Breece Hall or Mostert in the championship game? We've got a championship to help somebody win and 2 very solid AFC East running back options to play with. Pat, who are you going with?
I think I'm going Raheem Mostert here just because we have seen that Breece Hall's floor is hell, is the center of the earth. And in the championship game, you absolutely cannot have that. But the Dolphins are a different team on the road against a good team like Baltimore. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily trust that. But then alternatively, the Jets are in Cleveland. So it's not like they've kind of got some darling matchup themselves. And we've seen that Jets offense crater. You think that Miami's going to have to be high-flying in order to keep up. And that's still a really good offense who you're going to find at the 1-yard line probably still a fair amount. And Raheem Mostert is getting every single one of those carries.
Yeah.
I think Hall is less touchdown dependent than Mostert. I just think that Mostert is more likely to score a touchdown than, say, Hall. But maybe if you're in like a 2-week championship and you're down a fuck ton, Hall may be the play. But if we're talking most leagues have a 1-week, 1-shot championship here where you just need, probably just a solid number from everybody to get you there, I would probably go Mostert. But it's so close. Like, what is this, like a 4-man league here? Like, what? Like, I wonder what the other options are here, but...
Yeah, I mean, hey, Mostert was a later round pick, so I could see having these backs, but obviously I'm assuming you have 2 other running backs that you're already starting and that one of these guys is a flex if you're trying to figure out which one to go with, unless you have, I guess you could have 3 elite receivers that one of them's not trying to flex, but nonetheless, I am going to go with Breece Hall, and this is not strictly a bias pick because I literally traded Mostert for Hall and have touted Hall as a league winner, but Pat, what you say about Hall's floor, what we saw last week against Miami, yes, that was abysmal, but for the most part, we don't see that. His floor is still at least 10 points in PPR, and yeah, you won't be thrilled if he only gets you 10 in PPR, but Mostert's floor has been kind of similar to that. It's been a little bit higher over the last few weeks because of that just Dolphins offense keeps it afloat.
He didn't do shit for me, yeah.
Right, you go back since even, I'll go all the way back to week 7 against Philly, where that was right after he blew up against Carolina for 34 points. Since week 7, these have been his point totals, and I'm going to leave off the be after the decimal point because I'll say too many numbers. But 6, 10, 14, 10, 21, 12, 23, 18, 12. So you've got a lot of, just barely in the double-digit point totals there, and not really much of a ceiling with how the Dolphins' offense has been.
That is fair.
And Breece Hall, meanwhile, has gone since week 8 against the Giants. As bad as it feels like he's been, in PPR leagues, he's still ripping 10 most of the time. You've got 21, 10, 10, 18, 11, 10, 26, 2, what the fuck ever. I don't know where that came from. And then 43. So I would go with Breece. They're still both great plays, and just pick your poison.
I will say I think Hall is far more likely to break off like a 50-yard touchdown run than Raheem Mostert.
Sure.
But I think just Raheem Mostert is more likely to be hand-fed points rather than Hall. But again, I think you'll probably be happy with either one, but you never know. Shit comes down to less than a point sometimes, so...
Yeah, I hope that whoever you choose, it does not cost you your matchup, and if it does, don't yell at whoever you ended up agreeing with. Because I think a lot of the time, a lot of podcasts will give kind of a group opinion to like give you somebody that you want to start, and we're just over here, 2 co-hosts, completely different choices. So pick one of us that you like more and go with that guy. Thanks. Okay, next question. So, do I bench Diggs in the finals of my league? I've had Zay on my bench. Now, this has been a very contentious topic. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Stephon Diggs has been brutal. Pat, would you even remotely consider benching Stephon Diggs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he has been that bad. And, again, this is a case here where not just bad for Diggs standards. He hasn't been very, he hasn't been very, very good regardless. Let's see this. Let me pull some shit up here before I start talking out of my ass.
Yeah, the Diggs numbers have been highly unimpressive to this point.
Yeah, honestly, I'm glad I didn't make the playoffs in our league because Diggs would have just been letting me down left and right here, and I would not have been very happy with it. But
yeah,
oh boy, yeah, these past few weeks, 29, 48, 24. His last
these are yards,
game was
not
the Philly
fantasy
game,
points,
but then even
to be
before
clear.
that, 27, 34. This is all yardage here. Like, that's not great from Stephon Diggs, especially in such a pass offense like Buffalo was, except that, the Kansas City game or whatever game.
These are like mediocre tight end
me.
yardage totals. These are like Durham Smythe yardage totals.
Exactly, and he has not been a sure enough thing for touchdowns, especially with court jesters like Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox just waiting to catch a touchdown. Now that said, is Zay Flowers a slam dunk start? No, but I mean, he had a huge game this past week, at least in terms of usage. I mean, this is an offense, without Mark Andrews, but they didn't have Odell this past week though, didn't they?
I don't recall. You may be correct
pulling
there.
This up now too. I was so busy spending time with my beloved family, aka just not existing.
No, Odell played this week. Yeah, two catches for 13 yards on 3 targets. He was just not very visible. But
for Flowers to get 13 of 34 targets is significant. Is really significant. And this guy's been solid. He had a down week the week before that, I believe, which probably knocked people, including me, out of it. But yeah. But another thing too, 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks for Flowers. So you're not just completely banking on volume there. So I don't know if I'm quite ready to say yes, hit that button and start Flowers over Diggs, but I think it is very justified if you do so.
I agree. What's making this harder for me, too, is the matchup, because Diggs is facing the Patriots, and my initial instinct when I saw this question was, yes, you should start Diggs because our secondary, Pat, we literally have a player in our secondary right now that when I saw his name last week, I was like, who in the ever-loving fuck are you? Alex Austin is playing a majority of snaps in our secondary.
That's
I believe alongside... I believe alongside Miles Bryant. Those are our 2 primary corners. And I'm like, okay, that's got to be exploitable, right? Well, then you pull up what Patriots defense has allowed to receivers since week 12. And these point totals they sound deceptively high because it's the cumulative total of the entire receiving core. But it's 36, 25, 25, 36, 30. You go back earlier in the year, you've got the Patriots giving up. They gave up 47 to the Cowboys. They gave up 62 to the Dolphins, 49 to the Commanders. So it's like this defense is almost hitting their stride a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just this combination of dudes. Like, I don't want to complete. Maybe Alex Austin is a diamond in the rough. Bill finds those all the time. So this defense is playing fairly well against the pass. Diggs has not been as involved in the pass game as you want him to be. I think, gun to my head, I'm still going Stephon Diggs just because Zay Flowers is the alternative. And Zay Flowers just last week had a game against the Jags, 1 catch for 7 yards.
Exactly.
It's like that. He is a much more boom bust player, even though Diggs has been busting all over the place.
Well, that's what I mean. Like Diggs just hasn't boomed at all.
Yeah, I know. It's like that definition of insanity thing, right? Like you start him and he goes for another game, 6 catches for 35 yards. You're like, oh,
but
I should have saw that coming.
If there was a better alternative, I would say for sure Diggs is, again, like we kind of talked about, like with guys like Austin Eckler last week. Like these guys are no longer lineup locks, and I think Stephon Diggs is there. But that said, like I don't think Flowers is the slam dunk replacement.
No,
but I think it's like I said, I think it's justified to do it, but.
Yes, I think my conclusion here is benching Diggs is justified. I think whoever sent this question in likely has other options alongside Zay Flowers. Maybe think about starting one of those guys, whoever that may be. Or if there's somebody out on waivers that's like a hot pickup that's just gone unadded, you could go with them. Flowers is not a guy that completely moves the needle for me, but is benching Diggs crazy in concept? No. Final question, thoughts on Ty Chandler after this week? Ty Chandler is him, and I will continue to victory lap this forever. I don't care that he had a bad game this week. So Ty Chandler's stat line, 8 carries for 17 yards and a touchdown, but he had the touchdown, and you can't take that away from him.
And,
let me pull up what the Vikings themselves were just
carries to Alexander Madison's 2. He is still the clear number 1 back in that offense. And what they're Green Bay this week, right? I think.
Yes, Green Bay.
Okay, yeah, that's not like some kind of shutdown matchup here. Unless you've got like a really, unless you've got a better option, obviously, I think you can roll with Ty Chandler. We just saw 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati where he looked great. He looked fantastic. And I don't see any reason why he can't bounce back, especially we talked about maybe Jaron Hall, if he starts, could inject some life. Or they may just have a better game. Nick Mullins just might play a little better there, but... Yeah, I'm not completely out on it after one down week. I get it's the championship and you need it, but the volume is there, and you've just got to hope that the production comes with it at that point.
I think it comes down to it being this simple, and I didn't even realize this was the case until right now. The Lions are the number 1 fantasy defense against opposing running backs, and that is who the Vikings faced this past week. So
there you have it.
Shit happens. I mean, look, Nick Mullins threw for 411 yards, so the pass game is what they were leaning on as they tried to come back in that game. So is what it is. Ty Chandler is still, to me, a set and forget running back in most leagues, even with Alexander Madison back healthy. I think he is a good player, and I think he is certainly due for a bounce back this week. Pat, that'll do it for us. Got anything left for the people before we sign off?
No, guys and gals, whoever's in the championship game, good luck. Well, hopefully we'll be hearing from some champions and nothing. This is our last off the bench of 2023.
That's true. That is very true.
We've gone, like 8 months now doing this, guys. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live on YouTube or after the fact or on any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, whatever you but thank you guys. This has been a lot of fun, and we're going to have even more fun in 2024, and we hope you stick around with us.
We sure are. You guys just wait for the first full off season of Bran and Pat. It is going to be something. I don't know what that something is, but it's going to be something, that's for sure. But yes, for 2023, this will be our final show. So thank you guys for watching. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. We'll see you guys in